Okay, so welcome you all. Last session we did the couplet कबीर गर्व न कीजिए दे ही देखी सुरंग बिछरे पे मेला नहीं ज्यों की चुली भुजंग. And we had a good long discussion on how we are so body centric in various ways. We looked at various aspects of life. Anything that is that you wish to share from our last session, that's something that's coming up to your mind, else we shall move to the next couplet. Then let's take up the next one. I had shared a couple of couplets in the group, and I'm picking up from that only. And right now I'm sharing the same in the chat box also. So I've put it in the chat box that says, चले गए सो ना मिले, किसको पूछूं बात. चले गए सो ना मिले, किसको पूछूं बात. मात पिता सुत बांधवा, झूठा सब संघात. Kabir is saying those who have left, those who have gone, they are no more there. So whom do I ask? So we don't get to meet them. Whom do I ask? So what is that Kabir wants to ask? And then he goes ahead and he says, Mata Pita Sut Bandhva. So mother, father, children, brothers, sisters. So all the relationships that he is targeting, saying, Jhutha Sab Sanghat. Sanghat is the cluster, the gathering. And he says this entire gathering of all the relationships that we have, whom we depend upon, for whom we care so much, and our entire life is around them, it's moving around them. He says all of that is illusion. Jhutha sab sanghat. Nothing of that is really the truth. So a few questions that then comes into our mind is, why is Kabir saying that those who have left, they do not come back? And what is that he wants to ask? Kisko puchu baat? Whom should I ask? What is that he wants to ask? And then the next question is, what makes him say that all the relationships, mat, pita, sut, bandhava, they are all illusionary, they are all temporary, they're all the false. Jhutha sab sanghat. Why he's calling all that to be untrue? So what is that comes to your mind? Anybody would like to say something?
What came to my mind after reading this, what you are telling is, everything is temporary. All these, like last time when we say कि जो माया का जब हमने बात किया था कि जो भी है ये सब माया है और temporary है, nothing is permanent. So whom to ask where they have gone and who they are. They have left means कि अभी तो वो नहीं है, तो मैं किससे बात करूं कि वो मेरे सगे थे या कहाँ चले गए हैं. What is real? Whom to ask what is real and what is temporary? How to get the answer? Maybe this is he wants to say.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead.
The relationships are there, but it's the way we perceive them, the way we understand the relationship, the attachments we have, the beliefs we have about it. That is the illusion.
Okay.
So the actual relationship is there in the family, in this world of duality. Beyond that relationship is not there. But we come here in the human form. We're in this world of duality. The relationship is there. We do have responsibilities. It is just the attachment and the belief about the relationship. Because that relationship is no longer there after we pass on. It wasn't there before we came. It's not there after we pass on. So it's like Kamal said, it's a temporary thing while we are here. But we perceive it as a permanent thing. We think that is the final reality. And so all our actions, all our thoughts, all our attachments, everything come from that belief.
Okay.
That's the
Ashwini,
illusion. That's the illusion.
Okay. Ashwini, you want to say something?
Yeah, I actually quite agree with what Leroy is saying. First, I would say that the relationships that we have seem like everything to us, but underlying the relationship, there is another relationship which actually distinguishes, in the sense there is no separation. We are all one. There is no relationship because we are all one. You can't be related to yourself. So there is that underlying truth. And what then surfaces and what we live in a temporal sense is that you're my brother, you're my father, you're my spouse. These are lies. These are constructs that help us to navigate the underlying reality of the unity or the oneness. And I think that's why he calls it, it's not untruth in the bad sense, but I think he means it in the sense of Maya or illusion. In that sense, it is not reality. It's not the objective truth, is how I would perhaps look at it.
Okay. Yeah, Mamta.
Yeah, these are the roles, like we always say, na? We are playing the
We'll
roles.
come back to you. We'll come back to you.
Real.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
Also, I feel that he's also saying that whatever questions that we have, the answer is not outside there or in the relationship that we have around. Although we try to find, but they'll never be there, because you're never going to get the answers from there. You have to find it within yourself. That's my perception, maybe because I am in that state right now, so I'm kind of perceiving
that's
that.
All right. That's all right.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Geeta ji, you want to say something? Anything you want to add
so
on to?
What comes to me is, like, we live our lives according to our relations and cluster. All of our decisions are affected by that. And actually, once that a person is gone, or we are out of that, we realize that there's no answer from them actually. And so our life living according to those relations in our cluster, and depending on taking decisions, and through that is somewhat not done actually. It's not I would say the realization comes that that was not the right way to live, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, now.
Yeah. So I think, I would agree to what Geeta ji was mentioning over here. My understanding is also the same, that live as per the conditioning of others who are around us, and we are so used to it that we keep asking them. We are like, always all the decisions are based on what they are saying, and they're giving me as a feedback, or what my senses are taking from them. But once they're gone, then I'm in a fix, because I'm no more used to think on my own, or probably have never thought of thinking within, or I have always looked for what is visible, but I have not looked for what is not visible, what is beyond visible. Probably I have kept myself away from what was the real thing which existed. Looking beyond what is visible. That was
okay. Looking beyond what is visible. Okay. Yes, Malini, you want to say something?
Sure, Richa. What I get from this particular doha is that we always look for validations in relationship. Whether it's from parents, it's from spouse, siblings, friends, whomsoever they are, we are constantly, looking for validations, just because we have been always trained to be good. But once these people are not around, then a person feels blank, where to go.
Mm-hmm.
So the truth lies that your first and foremost relationship is within you, is from from your own self, and whichever thing you validate is your truth.
Okay.
So instead of going by that, we look for that validation everywhere else except for our own self.
Okay. So let's understand from start from some basic and then look at this couplet. We again come back to what is this self that we talk of feeling related to our own self. To us, this own self is nothing but a ego form, which is the product of the conditioning that we have received while being brought up, which is the product of all the environmental impact, all the experiences that we underwent, the way we were treated, and the way we felt, the emotions that rose in us every moment. So this self that we talk of, and when you go to Upanishads, they will always denote this self with small s. So this is nothing but ego self. And this ego self is actually the reflection of society or all the people that we have grown up with. Now, the kind of relationships that we have, or the way we look at relationships, or the way we relate, validation will be an automatic process. We will look for validation. Because the very fundamental of the way we relate is societal, it is not existential. And so even then, when we go to find out this relationship with self, that is not existential, that is not to be in the Atman or oneness or God or whatever word that you would like to pick up, soul, whatever word that you would like to pick up, but it is with society in a different form. So when we relate with others, and we heard saying that relation, and I like this coming from Ashwini, that there is oneness. So whom are we relating to? Interestingly, there is oneness for us is a concept. Do we live that? Do we experience that? Does our conduct says that we do not treat others as separate? And when I say others, I'm not just talking of human beings. I'm talking of every creature, every material, non-material, material, whatever thing on this planet or existence. So, however we may say, and we may know it on the level of knowledge, yet that is not the part of our being. We do not really know. So remember, knowing and belief that we talked about at great length. That's not the part of knowing. We do not live that. We still live in this illusion of separation. So there is me, there is you. And then you can test it. You can test it. If we feel hurt, just see how do we react. Or if there is somebody in front of you who is in need, just see where are you coming from. Do we support or not support in oneness? And in oneness, there is nothing like right or wrong behavior. So I'm reinstating that. So you may support or you may not support, and it's all very contextual. But where are you coming from? Who is the doer? What is the belief system that is operating through us? And all these actually become our tracks. or rather our truths, which are our precious special opinions. So when Kabir talks of किसको पूछूं बात, whom should I ask? What is that he wants to probably ask? And looking at the first part of the couplet, that chale gaye so na mile, those who have gone, I do not meet them. Possibly he wants to ask about what is this going and coming, and who goes and who comes, and is this impermanence the very fundamental of our life, or is there something which we can know, call as permanent? Is there something eternal, or everything is fragile? Something might live for 100 years, something might live for 500 years, something might live for 1,000 years, something might just live for 10 hours. But does everything that comes goes? And then if everything that comes goes, how do I know what is what? So this can be looked at, the first line of the couplet, it can be looked at from two understanding. One, Kabir wants to actually find out that you came and you went off. So what's the reality? What's the truth? And the very fact that you came and you went is also the indication that the way we are very fragile. So connecting to the story, I'm being reminded of the story of Buddha. And we all know how it happened that Buddha, who was Siddharth, when he was kept away from all the miseries possible in life. So his father was told that he's going to be a great saint. His father wanted him to be the king. And so he ensured that nothing would ever touch him which can initiate that sainthood in him. And to ensure that, he ensured that his life is full of colors, full of entertainment. He never gets bored with it. And when he was almost beyond teenage and he goes out and he sees somebody on the deathbed. So people were taking some dead body for cremation. And when he sees the dead body, he asks the person who was driving his chariot, he asks, who is this and what has happened to him? And he replies that he is dead. So Buddha says, or Siddharth says, he is dead. Does that mean I will also be dead one day? And the charioteer says, yes, we all will be dead one day. And Buddha says, then let's go back, because one day if I would be dead, then I'm already dead right now. Who is living and why is this living? And what is this that we call as life? And that was the moment when the question started to come into him. So Kabir wants to ask that if coming and going is how things happen on this planet, what is the reality? Whom should I ask? Who will tell me? And the very indication that coming and going is possible, that also becomes the premise that there is something eternal based on which coming and going keeps happening. Just like the plant has got roots, the flowers keep coming and going, and the roots stay there. So there has to be some root, something that stays. Now, this is a very crude example because even roots will go off one day. But just to understand that if something is coming and going, what is making it coming and going? And possibly that could be a quest, that if coming and going is how it is, then there has to be something. It's like when we go to movie, to see movies, the movie starts and movie ends. There is something that remains always, and that is a screen. Screen never goes off. And without this screen, we can't watch the movies. We can't see all that drama. So that screen is important. In fact, that is the most fundamental thing. However, in this entire process of watching the movie, we hardly or we never acknowledge the screen. We become one with what is happening on the screen. Our emotions rise and fall with all that. We experience all that. To some extent, we feel we are the one living like that. And we have no clue or no attention, no consciousness about the existence of screen at that moment. Or do we really remember that, oh, this is just coming and going and that screen is real? We don't. But the screen is fundamental for the movie to happen. So there has to be something fundamental for this coming and going of anything to happen, to exist. And possibly that is real, that is truth. And Kabir wants to know that. Kabir is demanding to know what we mostly tend to overlook, what we mostly tend to miss. And that is the mark of being spiritual. That which is obvious is something we can see. But what we see is what we become one with, the everyday experience, the highs and the lows. So it is not that the highs and the lows will not keep happening. But is there something in us which doesn't get shaken up with the highs and the lows, which doesn't get swayed with the highs and doesn't get depressed with the lows? Is there something in us? Do we have any cognizance of that? Are we in touch with that? So that is the screen. That is what Kabir wants to know. What is that which is the fundamental based on which things come and go, people come and go? And he wants to ask. Now moving on to the second line, when he says, Mat Pita Sudh Bandhava, Jhutha Sab Sanghat.
Richa, I have a question on first line.
Yeah, Komalji.
Yeah. Question also, and something came to the mind related to that. So just one line I would like to speak here. Like somebody was talking about some serial a few days back and was telling ki us serial mein ye ho gaya, wo mar gaya, wo aisa ho gaya. So the point which immediately came to the mind that it is said, don't get caught up in the drama of life. And the people are really getting caught up in the drama which is going on in the drama. Like TV is a drama in the drama. And there also we get caught up sometimes. Yeah. Right. But second question comes is it comes as real only, this drama of life. We get so much attached to this. Then I think this listening to the knowledge, meditation, and all these things are tools so that we can see that real screen and not the drama, and that we don't get attached to that drama and we get stick to that screen. So is listening to the knowledge meditation, and there are so many ways which have been told. How to find out which is the most effective way where we can be aware of this most of the time? थोड़ा सा कुछ उसमें कि can you throw a light on this little bit कि what do you think? मैं क्यों आजकल इतना ज़्यादा है, and some I think it is different for different people maybe. Then comes the ज्ञान मार्ग, भक्ति मार्ग and all, वो तो for लंबा हो जाएगा बात, but it is for different for different people. We cannot for sure say okay, yes, this is it, you do it and you'll be aware. A little bit on this if you can talk. Thank you, Richa.
So we all are conditioned differently, and we all have hence different paths or different things that will support us in moving ahead. That's one thing. But before that, even coming to that point, if we want to really be conscious, aware or so, we need to take a call. Now, in one of the sessions, we were discussing a lot on the choices. So there are 3 levels, and I'm just reiterating it for the ones who were not there. There is a level of choicelessness at the bottom. So when we be part of the everyday life, we do not really choose. Nobody says, I will not study, I will not get married, I'll not work, I'll not earn money, I do not have ambition. We do not choose. We simply go, this is how society operates. This is how it must happen. That's our standard format. And then comes a stage of choice wherein we can be conscious of why I am doing whatever I am doing. If I want to get married, why? If I want to pursue something, why?
This questioning will happen. Questioning will help. So, that's what.
This okay. Be with us, Komalji. Now, this stage is not something that happens to everyone. It's comparatively rare. And if you go to all those who have spoken about spirituality, they will all say this thing. Spirituality is not for everyone. It is only for those who are really now bored with the way they are living, and they are looking for something that allows them to be peaceful, settled, joyful, blissful. Till the time one finds their happiness in the everyday drama of life and they're okay with that, all these are literally bullshit for them. So that level of choice starts to happen. Unless we have chosen it with deep honesty and commitment, we can actually dive into various paths and we will still not get anything. So that choice has to accompany with deep thirst that this is not doing for me. So, the story that I just love at this point is, you have the story, a Greek mythology called Myth of Sisyphus. So the story says that this fellow Sisyphus, he was the king and he was the worshipper of sun god, and sometime he cheated big time, and so he was cursed. His curse was every day morning he has to roll up a big stone uphill. So he has to take that big stone uphill. By the evening that he reaches there and his job is done, the stone rolls down and comes down. And so the next day he has to do the same task. And the next day he has to do the same task. And the next day he has to do the same task. Till the time one doesn't get bored with this task, one will keep saying, okay, this is how the way life is. This is what is to be done. So let me do this. And if you look and how it happened for me, I looked at it in a way wherein I felt that, you see, every lifetime that people talk of, I do not know about lifetimes, but considering that, okay, this happens, what I have done in this lifetime, do I do anything different? No. Taking birth, education, and all that script that remains. Details can be different. I can get married at 20, I can get married at 14, I can get married at 40 also. I can have one kid, I can have 12 kids. I can move into some sector, some other sector. Details can be different, but largely the script remains same. That is very boring to me. So there is a thirst that says there has to be something beyond it. And there can be something different that occurs for you, that tells you that beyond what is, there is something else, and then that's the calling. So until this, Komalji, the first thing to realize is how deep is my calling? If this question is not answered, if I do not realize the solution, can I be settled? If I can be, then these are good spiritual shopping. But if I can't be, then something is happening. And what this something is happening, you get to see from your everyday life. Have the way you have been in your relationship 10 years ago, has it changed now? The way you were in your profession, has that changed in you or not? Has your reaction response changed or not? Have you started to experience something that demands to stay peaceful even in the midst of chaos? If these are not coming, then you will keep looking for various ways and you will not figure out what you are aligned to, because the thirst is still not deep. So when we go to Upanishad and they talk of Patrita, there are two things that they strongly talk of. One, how deep is your thirst? And second, how honest you are to acknowledge that you have the thirst or you do not have the thirst, or at whatever level it is. Without this deep honesty and without the thirst, Patrita does not happen. The journey does not even start. So the first thing for each one of us is to understand, are we even there? Or are we very happy in the drama of duality, Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum? And Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, movies like that, they make big buck because they are about Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, and everybody experiences Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum. And so they say that, yes, this is the truth of life. We are happy on times and we are sad at times. And this is how life is. So they're already defined and they're settled with the definition of what life is. So when one is already settled with the definition, where is the question of discovering, realizing? The question of discovering and realizing only happens when you are not settled with what is. So my suggestion is, first try and find out where you are. After you have found out, you will be able to figure out what resonates with you. And frankly speaking, the different marks are not really different. They're all the same. Yes, in our everyday life, it is not, too much of gyan, and you will get bored. Life will become very boring. Because gyan is not what is important. How it is reflecting in your life, that is important. And when that starts to reflect, the easiness that one feels, the unburdenedness that one feels, the lightness that one feels, it's like there is spring in the feet. Then you will not really start looking forward to various ways. Then you will be okay with one way. And there will also be not rejections if different ways come to your way. Nay, I am the Bhakti Marg. For example, I'll tell you, I have seen this happening. There is this group of people in Buddhism who do some chanting, etc. And I have seen these people almost becoming a kind of fanatic. That this is it. This is what gives you peace. This is what gives you whatever you need it. And they don't even look at what is that they are getting and what is that they are engaged in. The belief is that strong. And that belief pulls them. There is no knowing that they live. So on the surface, they might feel that, yes, I am so cool, it's so nice, and it's so nice to keep chanting, and it answers so many questions of mine. But deep within, they still keep boiling. They still remain unsettled. And I've just picked up an example, but this is how it is for various other panths. In the moment one becomes some panthi, there is a problem. Osho always said that master is a light, but the moment the master goes off, all that remains is smoke. The light is gone. And people try to catch that. And people try. And then people get identified with that. So now another level of identification is happening. Have you seen you will hear that in the voice when people say, I am Osho follower, I am Krishnamurti follower, I am this follower, I am that follower. Most of the time. There definitely will be people who will be genuinely honest and hence something would be happening in their life. But most of the time, this is how the case is. Because we are too terrified to go deep into the understanding. The moment we go deep, the moment we start really going down the stairs, it's like the Tehkhana, which has been closed for ages. And now you are stepping down to open that up. One is so afraid. The first thing that happens is you look at your life and you say, oh my God, I have wasted my entire life. How have I lived? It is so difficult to accept that the way I lived was incorrect. That's one thing that happens. And the second is it starts taking away all our beliefs, all our identities. Everything gets into the questioned moment. And that is very unsettling because that's been premise on which we have lived our life. So first, check how thirsty you are. And then you will be guided the right way. I totally go by the Zen philosophy. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. You will get the right guidance. Ashwini, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm in a very chaotic day, so please forgive me for not turning my camera on.
No, that's okay.
I actually, this was a very interesting question because I came across this earlier. Somebody saying that how can we all, if awareness is everything, then how can we always be in awareness? And I sometimes think the answer to that is that we all want or we aspire to have mystical experiences. But what we forget is that the beauty or the revelation lie in the everyday and the ordinary. And we must put ourselves, we must focus ourselves to what is in front of us and do what we are required to do. Literally, like this is your karma, you have to do this. If you're doing something, then you do it well and do it with a single-minded purpose and find beauty in the ordinariness of it. Even the people who have mystical experiences, they maybe have it once and then it is fleeting. And they get to a level because of that mystical experience. But I think even the search for that mystical experience, aspiration for that mystical experience becomes an attachment that defeats us. So that's all I wanted to say.
All the mystical experience are of the mind itself. We underestimate mind. We underestimate mind like crazy. The Kabir says so much about mind, and one of the we do not understand that all that experience that we are having, to have all that experience, there has to be an experiencer. And who is this experiencer? We do not question that. Because when it comes to Kabir, he says, जब मैं था तब हरि नहीं, अब हरि है मैं नहीं. Now, even to me, it is very baffling. अब हरि है मैं नहीं. So who is experiencing Hari? Who is even there to say that Hari is there? So mystical experiences must be discounted. They must be discounted. And as you rightly said, there is so much of attachment to all this. It's like and then we had these babas, like they will do Om Phat and you have a laddu in hand and a gold chain in hand, and so many movies have reflected these things. And people get so swayed and fascinated by all this. But who is having those mystical experiences? And I remember there are some stories of Maharshi Raman wherein the disciple is saying, Maharshi, you are here inside, but I just saw you outside on the charpai. And Maharshi would not even answer. He will simply dismiss the question. Because he doesn't want people to get caught up in these mysticism stuff. The same used to happen with Osho. I was long back when I was hearing him once. One person asked him, Acharya ji, when you talk of Krishna, you talk so wow about him. And at the second end, you are saying that what he did is so wrong. And you are logical in both the ways. I don't know which one to pick up, which one to believe. And Osho says, I am not here to give you beliefs. I'm here to break those down. And I know the moment I say something, you pick up the belief. So I have to question that. I have to demolish that. So I will say something which goes against it. Because I'm not talking of Krishna. I'm talking of you. And I'm talking to you. It is not Krishna that is important. You are important. So with people of mystical experience, and then that is when in the world of duality, you can prove anything with logic.
Lisa, can I say something?
Yeah, Ishan.
Yeah, I think we need to separate mystical experiences from miracles or perceived miracles, because what we perceive miracles are something which are beyond our understanding. I think mystical experiences are something which are the result of coming in alignment with the higher dimensions. So these are basically the fruits of our
So
something which we sow.
For us, that is
These
still
are
on a
basically
higher.
the fruits that we reap from something that we sow.
Yes.
So I don't think we can confuse.
It is not about confusing, but if at all
I mean, we have to separate them.
Yes, I agree with Ishan.
It's not
Even
even
if this was there in my
separating.
mind when
It's not even about separating. In fact, I would say this must be looked at. This must be looked at because
may or may not, you can say.
We tend to get in awe with mystical experience. We have been grown up in a way wherein experience number one becomes something very important for us. People with 30 years of experience.
People
with 30 years of experience, and if I have only 5 years of experience, I'll get in awe. Oh my God, 30 years of experience, how rich in experience. The very word experience itself has such heavy connotation with it in our everyday life. And hence, we must, I would say, we must look at mystical experience from those neutral eyes. Is that what is we are looking in life? Then one can go and work on certain meditative techniques and all those things, and you will get that. But the question is that what you want? If that is what you want, that is all right.
Right, that's what. No, it may be or may not be. You only know what this experience is and whether it is miracle or like in what sense I am taking
Komalji,
it.
Anything that is not taking me to that oneness. If you will ask me, I will discount that. I am not saying that that cannot be helpful in that movement towards oneness. I will not say that.
I think they are just the milestones. But the thing is that we put too much emphasis on them and we push too much meaning of them that we get lost.
And we get stuck at those milestones. If at all you can call them milestones. I don't know.
Because we pedestalize them so much. I think that's
we might even have no such experience in moving in that direction. We might even have no such experience, and that is perfectly all right. So when Ashwini is saying, isn't a miracle a mystical experience? It is like what you call miracle. And I'll give you an example when I'm saying this. Osho puts this very beautifully. He says, we all remember this story of Gautam Buddha, wherein this lady who comes to him because her son and husband both have died, and she is in utter mess, and she's crying and she's saying that I did not go ahead to be sati on my husband's funeral pyre because I had the son to take care of, but now even the son is gone. So how do I live? All my anchors have been pulled off. I want to die. Please help me. Please somebody get my son back to life. And people suggest that you go to Gautam Buddha, who is there at the outset of the village, and he will help you. He is the man. He can do that miracle. And she goes, and Buddha looks at her, and he does not say anything. He says, I will get your son back to life. Just get me a handful of mustard seeds. Now she is very happy that handful of mustard seeds, I can get quintals of it because this village produces mustard seeds. There is farming of mustard seeds in this village. But then Buddha puts a condition. He says, but then you have to get me the mustard seeds from the house where from nobody has ever died. There has been no death. And she says, okay. And she goes, and it's morning till evening that she is asking at every door, and every place she's being told that my mother has died, my child has died, my spouse has died, my brother has died, my grandfather has died, somebody or the other has died. By the evening, when she goes through this, she comes back to her senses and she realizes, oh my God, death is something that will happen. So even if my son comes back to life, death will happen to him again. And then she goes to Buddha and she says, please accept me as your bhikkhuni, as your disciple. Because if death is the fact of life, then even if my son comes back to life, even if you bring him back, he will die once again. So what's the fun? What's the whole beauty of it? There is no beauty in it. Osho calls this a miracle, that a lady who is in such despair, she is being converted into somebody who has become so aware about this entire process of life. Osho calls this a miracle. And why this came to Osho was because somebody had asked him that Jesus had brought somebody into life and all those. There are stories like that. And he had been doing miracles. And then Osho says, that is not a miracle. I don't even consider that a miracle. How is that a miracle? The fellow will again die. So what stays? This is the real miracle. So what is that we are indicating as miracle? I would say that the thirst that we get into is a miracle for us. Being in this kind of conditioning and the life, if we get to taste that, that's a miracle. So the way I have looked at it, because it's not that I have not looked at energy and healing dimensions, etc., etc. Those things happen. Those things happen, and I will not discount that. Yet, what's more important, or what is of the fundamental importance, and if at all, if you can call this purpose of life, is to move towards your Buddhahood, which Krishna calls as Swadharma. That is your dharma. That is your dharma. So, how you want to treat a mystical experience, you are free to do that. I try to hold myself from that, primarily because it's very fascinating. At times, it's very fascinating, and getting lost in that is very easy. So holding on that awareness that it's okay, it's all right.
I think it has become too much of a.
Yeah, Ishan, you were saying something?
I think it has become too much of a loaded term of late.
Agreed. Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
Different people having different.
Yeah. We have very
I'm
different
saying
connotations.
It has become a very much loaded term of late. The so-called word, the mystical experience.
Right.
Yeah, because everyone has a different perception of it. Yes. One thing about you said, na, jab main tha hari nahi, ab hari hai main nahi. I don't think it's about experiencer. I think what he tries to say in this one is, and I might be wrong, I think what he tries to say is, when I was full of myself, then Hari was not there. And now when he is there, then I'm empty.
Yeah. Who is there to call himself empty?
Main nahi means whatever I was.
What you are saying is absolutely right.
Whatever I perceived to be myself, then that has evaporated.
Yes. The moment whatever I had been perceiving as myself has evaporated, nobody can call even that there is something which is empty. Because even to say that there is something which is empty, somebody has to be there. And that is what is called dissolution in the spiritual understanding. That is what we call as dissolution. Now, you want to say something?
Yeah. So actually, when we were talking about it, there was one story, I think I remember it from the discourse of Acharya Prashant. He talked about Badruddin, who became wise, and he was living in a village. And when he became wise, then all the people came to him and asked him, Acha, how was your life before becoming wise and after becoming wise? And his answer was like, before becoming wise, I used to wake up early in the morning, and it was so difficult for me to do the daily course and then go to the jungle, cut the trees and get the woods and go to the market, sell it and buy some food, some grocery, come back and prepare the food, eat it, and then somehow go to bed. And then with all the excitement, everyone asked him then, and now how is your life? And it's like, oh, now it's wonderful. It's so beautiful, it's so pleasant. I wake up early in the morning, I do my daily course, I take the axe, go to the jungle, get the woods, and then sell it in the market, get the money, buy some grocery, come back home, and I'm so energetic, prepare the food, eat it, and sleep nicely. So Probably.
That reminds me of Zen saying that Zen is when you are hungry, you eat, and when you feel sleepy, you sleep. That's it. So if in the language of Zen, what is realization? Oh, you eat when you are hungry, and you sleep when you when you're sleeping. And then people say, but this is what we all do. And the master said, no, you do not do this. When you eat even when you're not hungry. You start salivating the moment you see something which you call tasty, which in your mind is tasty. So you do not really eat when you're hungry. You eat any time. Secondly, when you eat, you are not just eating. You have so many things happening here. You are making plans, you're cursing somebody, you're thinking about some show, you're recalling some conversation, you are planning what I'll do next. You do not even have an idea as to what you're chewing to the fullest. So you're not eating when you're eating. And similarly, you have your timetable of when you should sleep and when you should wake up. You do not wake up when it's the body, the early in the morning, you see it feels so nice to keep sleeping even after the alarm goes 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes. So you do not eat when you are hungry, and you do not sleep when you really need to sleep. That's how they answer. Life becomes so simple. There is no demarcation about a realized person only would do this, and the unrealized would not do that. The lie, from the external, from the outside, to people who do not understand this, everything looks the same. Everything is the same. There is no difference. The difference is in the quality of being. The difference is in the quality of being. And to know that, one has to go through the process. Otherwise, to know that is very difficult. You can't know. You will always look from the eyes that you have, which is the one colored with perception. Okay. So let's move to the second line. What makes Kabir say Mat Pita Sudh Bandhava Chhootha Sab Sangha? So relationship is something, as Ashwini also said, that when there is oneness, where is this relationship? Yes, they are very illusionary, but they are our truths. They are our facts. We move around in relationship. So many decisions are influenced because of decision of relationship. You see, a lot of us do not appear for the session because we have some engagements. It becomes so difficult for us to say no to the engagement so many times. And come. So it is like that. Everything, and then at the end is the session. So if everything is sorted, then I come for the session. Not that I will sort everything because I have to go for the session. That does not happen with us, with most of us. I am no exception, but I'm just bringing this fact to all of us. So then Kabir says, everybody comes and goes. Even these relationships will come and go. What are these relationships? How should I look at these relationships? Why should I be tied to what I call as my mother or my father or my relative or my son or whatever? How should I look at it? So he's questioning the very fundamental of relationships. Now, the first thing that I think that is important for all of us to realize is we are very self-centric entities. We are very self-centric entities. And what makes me say that is, anything you pick up in life, you will see that until it is impacting you in some way, you don't talk of it. So much must be happening in Afghanistan right now. But until and unless in some way it impacts me, even in my ideology, for example, I could be liberals or whatever, and hence it impacts me. I will not talk about it until unless there is some connection of who am I with that. And that is why it becomes so easy for us to dismiss the things that's happening around us. And we are only shaken when things happen with us. For example, so many rape cases we hear every now and then. Do we take any action? We don't. Going on the way, we see accidents. How many times do we really stop by to support the person? We have our engagements lined up. To leave your plan right now and step out to do something which is totally unrelated, how easy is that? So we can test it for ourselves in different ways. But self-centricity is our foundation, which is operating from the ego. So how do we look at relationships? These relationships, they actually serve for us as a part of identity. You see, I am a daughter because I have a mother and father. The moment my mother goes off, my father goes off, my identity as a daughter is shaken. Now that only remains in memory. This also is one reason why we find death so difficult to take. Every death is death of our identity in some way. We do not mourn for all the death. We don't feel grieved for all the death that's happening day in and day night. There are so many people dying every moment. We don't feel grief because we are not connected. And so in every relationship, what we tend to do is we tend to protect our identities. That's where our relationship comes from. And if you look at the general discussions or talks, are we not supposed to do this? I did so much for you. I did this for you. I considered you here and there, and see how are you behaving, and see how are you coming back to me. So I did this and you did that. And now that you are my husband, should you not do this? Is a husband not supposed to do all this? Is a child not supposed to do all this? Don't I have duties and responsibilities as a daughter, as a son? So all our relationships are about safeguarding who am I. You see, you try and do this. One moment you say, no, I don't own this responsibility. I am no more your husband. The relationship will go at stake. Because the fundamental of relationship is who am I? The wife is not connected to me because there is no expectation, because there is just love from the space of love, and it doesn't matter if you fulfill my expectation or not, I still be there. That does not happen. But because you are doing this for me, so I am with you. So there is a transaction involved. There is a transaction involved. Now the transactions are at various levels. That's a different story altogether. But without that transaction, we do not feel related. We don't talk of relationships. And that's what makes Kabir question. And this reminds me of the story of, I think it was Valmiki. Yeah. That he was a thief. And then once he comes in front of a saint and he says, give me all that you have. And the saint says, tie me to this tree and you take away all that I have. You think that I have. I am all right with that. But you go and ask people for whom you are actually doing this work, for whose survival you are actually doing this work, are they willing to participate in the result that you will receive because of the work that you are doing? So you are cheating others, you are harassing others, you will have its result, there will be karma. Will they participate in the result? Because they are participating in what you are getting out of this job. And if they will participate, I am here, tie me up with the tree and come back and take everything. And this is called moment of truth. So the Rishi says, okay, what's a big deal? Let me go and find out. And he goes and he asks his father, Father, I am stealing things to take care of you. Tomorrow when the karmic reaction comes to me, the results come to me, will you participate in that? Because I'm doing this to take care of you. The father says, no, not at all. You're supposed to take care of me. You are my son. How you take care of me is not my prerogative. I have not dictated you to do this. Have I asked you to do this? Then why should I participate in the result of this? Similar is the answer he received from his wife, from his son. And then there was this moment of truth. He says, oh my God, for all those people for whom I am doing this, they are not willing to participate. Then why should I keep accumulating all the bad stuff? And that was the moment wherein he turns into a rishi from a thief, from a dacoit. I remember I was associated with an organization and I was doing, training of students coming from Kashmir. And in one of the discussions, one of the students was saying, ma'am, I want to go to gym and I want to work on my health because I'm obese. But my mother is here and I do not go to gym because then she will say that you don't have time for me and you don't spend time with me and you are always out. And I asked him, why don't you go and ask your mother that if you are missing gym because you got to stay with her, will she take the responsibility of your being obese? And he immediately replied then, no, she will say, have I asked you not to go to gym? Have I stopped you from going to gym? She will say this to me. I said, see, here is your answer. You are not going because of her. And you yourself are saying that she'll not take the responsibility of you not going. Then what is stopping you? Because we have our own perception about the relationships, the way we relate. You are not willing to take, even if she says that you went to the gym and you left me, because you do not know what is the right thing to do for you right now. And that demands some awareness and a deep honesty. Should I be doing what I am doing? How aligned is it to the right purpose? So our relationships are like that. We are not into our relationships because we are all looking at truth. And I remember Acharya Prashant saying this. We were in one of the discussion wherein he said, it's not that relationships are not possible, that you can't relate with others. You can, and you can relate beautifully. But before that, there has to be the relationship with that. You must have that relationship with that. And the other person also must have that relationship with that. And then only you people will be able to relate with each other in the true sense. Because it is exactly there when you start operating from the space of love and not from the space of expectations and ego and conditionings. When you are able to allow others to do what is right for them, despite the fact that you might not be okay with that, despite the fact that they might not be spending time with you, because you understand that that is important for them. And hence the expectation goes off. And when you do something, you do not do because you want to say that, hey, I am supposed to do and see, I have fulfilled my duties. But you do it because you say, it's so lovely to see that smile on the other person's face. And even if that person does not smile, it is still lovely.
But Richa, who will decide, like when like you are saying ki if he is doing right, then you are happy, like you are, but if you think the other way around, the other person what is doing is not right, if you think sometimes it happen, then how to handle that? And if the two things are on the other side, like I've seen people.
Komalji, that is why it is said that true relationship can happen if we both are connected to that. Because if there is
not,
that connection,
that's what I'm asking.
so
if
there
not,
is no connection, then the only thing that you can work upon is, or then the only thing that you can be conscious of is, are you moving towards that? Because your movement towards that, when it starts to reflect in your being, it inspires the other person. Because then you will not be at least operating out of guilt, shame, expectation. You did this for me, you talked like this, you behaved like this. Despite the fact that the other person was maybe sarcastic at you, you will still be able to respond nicely and not take the load. Let it go. Rather, not even let it come in, because of which it has to go. It does not touches you. So the other person, it's again coming back to this story of Buddha. When he goes to a village and one person comes and spits on his face and he curses Buddha left, right, center, and Buddha is calm and he says, okay, thank you. The next day people tell him in the village that, oh my God, do you have an idea what have you done? You have cursed a person who is a Mahatma, who is a realized person, and blah blah blah. And the next day he goes to him with all the gifts and sweets and the everything, the har and everything, and Buddha is still okay. There is nothing like pleasantness. He says, I am so sorry, I did this with you and did all that. Buddha is at the same space. The way he said okay yesterday, he's saying okay the same way today. And then this person is taken aback. I cursed you so much yesterday, you just said okay. I'm now bringing all this thing to you today, and I'm actually feeling so guilty, and I'm wanting to actually worship you. You are still saying okay. There is no difference in how you behaved yesterday and today. And Buddha says, if somebody brings to you a gift and you don't take it, what happens to you? He says, it stays with me. He says, yeah, yesterday what you brought was a gift, I did not take. It stayed with you. Today also what you have brought, I have not taken. It stays with you. How come have I got affected? What in me should get affected? So even if the other person says something or not say something, how am I responding? Which space am I responding? Am I able to hold my space of peace? That something that is unshakable in me, despite how people are behaving outside? Can I be that? And trust me, when that unshakable in you always reflects in your being, people start to understand. It takes time. And at times they don't even understand. And that also is okay. Say everything is always all right.
Then you understand that they don't understand.
And it's okay. Might be they need some different suffering to undergo to start looking towards truth. When Rumi says, wound is the place where from light enters you.
Yeah, right.
We hardly remember godliness, truth, etc. when we are happy. Nobody questions, why am I happy? Why this happiness has come to me? Do I even deserve all this? But when things are breaked up, why me? That becomes an important question. What I have done, Lord, what I have done? Why me? That's why Kabir says, no, दुख में सुमिरन सब करे, सुख में करे ना कोई, जो सुख में सुमिरन करे तो दुख का को हो. So we do not remember him every time, and so we are swaying, and this is what happens in our relationship. Till the time the relationships are beautiful, we it's so called beautiful, like you have these examples, no, and I hear people saying शादी के पहले साल में जो वाइफ होती है वो क्या होती है, सम स्वर्णमुखी होती है, बाद में वो चंद्रमुखी हो जाती है नेक्स्ट ईयर, उसके बाद वो ज्वालामुखी हो जाती है, and then all this nonsense keeps rotating around. So why come is she so sweet in the first year, and then her sweetness reduces in the second, and the third year she is a volcano itself. And when she is volcano, you never ask, why were you so sweet in the beginning? What in me has changed that then you were so sweet and now you are not so sweet? That we do not ask. We simply say you are a volcano right now, and this is not okay. You used to be so nice then. And the same is happening at the wife end also. It's not that it's only one part. It's both the parties doing the same thing in different ways. So what is in us that relates is a big question. And as long as ego will keep relating, as long as it's the identities that will keep relating, relationships will be illusionary, they will be false. Ashwini says, I'm a vegan activist and I often ask this question, are you paying the full karmic price of the animals on your plates and your bodies? Or is the burden is being borne by someone who simply trying to earn a living to fulfill his needs and his family's needs? So when you even choose to butcher animals to fulfill your needs and your family needs, in what consciousness have you choose to end something's life? Where are you coming from that it doesn't pain you when you end something's life? That's a big question. Now, as far as karmic price is concerned, yes, we all are paying price for everybody. So, Bodhisattva is a very beautiful concept. And Bodhisattva says that they are supposed to be the people who have arrived, but they do not go beyond. They stay attached in some way because they say till the time the last blade of the grass also does not get realized, I will not go, because I alone cannot go. Everybody must come along, and then only I will be able to go. So yes, there is a shared karmic repository. We all pay for it. And that is why even the last time when we were talking of who am I that I have that has taken birth? Is it the same soul doing so many journeys, etc.? And who is the same soul? So when you go to Upanishad, they have picked up the word called Jivatma, because Atma is a word very, very badly corrupted. So then they will call it Jivatma, which is nothing but ego, which is nothing but desire. So is it the same desire that is taking birth every time, etc.? No, the process is very complex. The process is very complex. A very tidbit of it I have kind of understood. I can't really say I understand it at the greater length. That demands possibly me also to be much more silent with them, which of course I'm not at this moment. But yes, there is a shared consciousness. And similarly, there is shared karmic action. So if we think that just my not eating non-vegetarian food is going to serve, or just my being vegan is going to serve, no, that will not. It is important that we act in the direction of waking everybody up who is sleeping. That process must continue. So everything is intertwined. We all pay for everything. it is very difficult to say what we are paying for. And that is why when you go to saints, they will also tell you that just you moving onto the path of truth actually is something that takes your entire family or everybody who is in consideration. It's like आप पार लग गए तो आप समझिए कि आपके साथ जितने हैं वो सभी पार लग रहे हैं, because that element does get into them. And this is a small try, if at all we have to try for something that we must do, to see if we are on the path of Swadharma and take everybody along. And this happens very beautifully, you know, when people see you into it for really long, and they start seeing you that yes, there is a shift in you. The person who used to interact with me 5 years ago and the person who is interacting with me right now, they seem to be two different people. Then it does lightens something in them which questions, what is that this person has come in touch with? And then allow them to have their journey. Allow them to have their journey. The fundamental responsibility is when you move towards that, then others themselves come. So your movement towards that is the fundamental responsibility. I think we will we'll look at this relationship thing in little more detail the next Thursday that we meet. It's already 1.5 hours. And let's hear from you all what you want to say. Leroy, you want to say something?
Be a little louder, Richa. थोड़ा बहुत ध्यान से सुनना पड़ता है.
So I'm saying that we will continue with this the next session. We will look at relationships a little more deeper in the next session next Thursday, and let's hear what's happening in you. What questions do you have, or anything that you want to share? So Leroy is already raising hands. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be brief. It's a beautiful discourse. This is really fantastic. I'm very grateful to you for this. So when you were talking earlier about when something goes wrong, for example, you gave the example, we're going somewhere and there's an accident. Do we stop to help that person, or we just go? Maybe we're going to work or for some appointment, some meeting. It's just an insight I had at that time, which I want to share, that what stops us from helping that person, we are afraid. Maybe if we're going to work, we're afraid of being late, of losing our job, or if it's an important meeting, we're afraid that that person will be upset, or we won't get what we're going for. So it's all motivated by fear, whether it is worry, anxiety, concern, these are all different names for it. The basis of all that is some form of fear. So we have to ask ourselves, am I being motivated by fear or the opposite? Now, the opposite of fear is not courage. As I've learned in another course, the opposite of fear is love. There are only two basic emotions, fear and love. Either your actions come from fear, and you may not think of it as fear, but it may be a very low-grade fear. Anything, even the slightest concern, is based on fear. So if we ask that question, am I motivated? Is it by fear? If it is not fear, then it is love. And love is not love in the form of attachment to somebody or something. Love is what remains when all fear has gone. It's not something that you do, it's something that is. So yeah, that insight came to me, that we can ask ourselves, why am I not helping this person? What am I worried about that I'm rushing there? So as long as we are motivated by fear, we'll be trapped in this cycle. And I think we should work towards that. Thank you.
Yes, very true.
Can I say something about it?
Sure, Ishan.
Can I say something about this? What Leroy said?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I think it's not about fear primarily. I think it's about inclusiveness and exclusiveness. If we are able to, include someone, yeah. If we are inclusive in our approach, then we can overcome fear easily. Fear does not come into our consciousness. But if we are not inclusive and ye rishta nahi hai, nata nahi hai, we become exclusive. Only then, whatever our weaknesses are, whether it being fear or time ka kami hai, ye tab samne cheezein aati. So I think it's more about being inclusive and exclusive rather than being fear and being courageous. क्योंकि courageous person भी ये काम कर सकता है कि वो उसको छोड़ के चला जाए. But inclusive person जो होगा वो अपने fear को conquer करके उसको लेकर जाए.
Correct.
So this is the way I see it.
So the next question is, what makes us inclusive or exclusive? So maybe you can reflect on that and just keep asking this question. What is making me inclusive or exclusive? And whatever answer you get, question that also, and then just try and go a level deeper. And that will help you to arrive at the very basic from which we all are operated from. So yes, inclusiveness and exclusiveness is what will happen, but that is actually the result of something. So we will need to ask more deeper questions to really go to that. Okay. Anything else that anybody wants to?
Yeah, I think I would like to say something over here, like, because we're talking about getting deeper into understanding relationship and things. So a wonderful thing which happened today, I think day before, my mom said that she's a teacher and she wants to continue becoming a teacher, and we were just having a discussion. And she got an opportunity, and then she said, what? Then I said, why don't you go ahead and do whatever you want to do? If you are comfortable, I'm absolutely fine with that. So today she had the interview, and after the interview, the interviewer said that he wants to speak with me. And then when I went and I attended the Zoom call, so the first question which was thrown towards me was that, are you comfortable? I said, is this a question or I said, why should I be comfortable? How does it matter whether I'm comfortable or not? Because she doesn't have to take a permission from me. At the end of the day, she's my mother, and if she wants to do, she can do it. So then he understood, and then he said, no, my question is not because I'm taking permission from you. I'm saying that, are you comfortable with the fact that she's going to be there, and she would not withdraw in the middle of the session. That was the question, and that was the main thing. And he mentioned, because most of the cases, it's a charitable school, and most of the cases this happens, that most of the time the teachers, they volunteer and then they come out, they leave in between, and hence the students, so when I told them that I am there to support her, and I'm not there to tell her what has to be done, or she doesn't need to take a permission from me. She's okay, I'm okay. If she's not okay, I'm not okay. That's the thing. It is her comfort level. So I guess inclusiveness or exclusiveness, I think one has to own it. I think if I'm doing something, it's my action and I need to own it. If my mother says that she's going to own it and she's absolutely fine, I'll be a support in terms of creating an environment. And it's the other way around as well. If I say that I want to own it and I do something and she creates an environment, it's not about taking permission, or it's not about asking or something. It's about having an understanding that we both are going to live together, and there is a coexistence.
The challenge is sense of owing what we do with people that we connect in terms of relationships, whom we say they are our people, our family, etc. It is easier to connect with people whom I don't even know, whom I see someday in an accident on the roadside. Owing there is a very challenging thing. So that's where then this question is, what makes me take ownership for whatever? What in me wants to take ownership for whatever? Or what in me doesn't want to take ownership for whatever? So
that identity again
yeah,
it comes.
yeah,
No?
you do whatever, trust me, when you
Yeah,
go
it is to protect your
question and
identity
question and
when you're
question, you will come to that level that you are protecting your identity. You will come
because
to that
inclusion,
level.
we cannot include
Yeah.
or exclude anybody. As such, on the higher level, we are all included only. That's a
This
fact
exactly
that we
is
are
why,
already included.
this
Just to
exactly is
realize
why,
that we have to
this
work
exactly is
towards that.
why when you go to saints, they will tend to dismiss everything that you say. You will always have a next level question that will demand you to go even deep. And so yes, it's a beautiful process because it opens a lot for us. It makes us more conscious. At least at the level of choice, we are better off in terms of what we are choosing, and we take the responsibility of what we are choosing. And we do not say that I am choosing because of you. That goes off. There is no because of you, because of it. I am responsible for my own, for all that emotions that happen to me. And now I have to see, am I getting swayed by those emotions, or can I just still be centered? Maybe I need some space to stay silent and allow it to go, or would like to reflect on why is this emotion happening in me, what in me is getting hurt or happy or whatever, and is this emotion taking away my centeredness, or this emotion supporting me in being more centered? What is happening? And when we start asking these things every moment, then we move to a level wherein we become playful about everything, which is the level of choicelessness. It's okay that it is happening. This is how it is supposed to happen. Play around and have fun. Even when you are crying, you are having fun and crying. It's like that. Even when you are sad, you know, okay, this is the part of the game. It's okay. Let me be sad. It's all right. All this is happening on the level of mind, and I'll be out of it. And then things become easy. For us, whenever we say something, even if we try to check, is there a next level question, that will help us. Yeah. So at this junction, I think it's time that we can. Yeah.
Risha,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm next Thursday. I have another engagement, which is from 6 to 9. It conflicts with this, so I still haven't decided. It's a commitment, but if I cannot attend this, can I please get the recording?
Recordings will always be available to everybody.
Okay.
For all the open sessions, it is always open. I put it on YouTube and I share the link, so you can always go through that.
Okay, so I have,
So do not worry.
yeah, if I might have to make a commitment there. If I have to, then just forgive me for not being here, but I look forward to the recording. Thank you.
Let's just do the prarthana and then we close with it. Okay, so if you know, you can chant with me, else you can just be silent with it. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.